Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, Sherry Horn Hassan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, coming to you on June 17, 2021, from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. I'm pleased to announce that my guest today is once again professional medical and financial astrologer Mitchell Lewis, who I'll be introducing properly, of course, in just a few moments. But first, my usual housekeeping stuff. You can find me on Facebook at Karmic Evolution for Your Soul. You can also join my email newsletter list there just by scrolling down on the left-hand side. They've changed a few things on Facebook, but just hunt around till you find join email list, and you can sign up there. Secondarily, if you've missed any shows, want to re-listen to a specific one, you can simply go to karmicevolution.com, click on radio show on the upper hand banner, and scroll down that page, and you can access all of the recordings of all my archived past shows. And finally, I continue to offer my discounted 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to listeners for only $99. And so if you're looking for greater consciousness about your soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, if you'd like to move from chaos to clarity in areas of importance to you, like relationships, career, finances, health, if you are interested in healing old karmic wounds and co-creating your own future happiness and success, awaken your true potential and highest destiny in this lifetime, then you want to take advantage of my special discounted offer for listeners, which again is a 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. Simply email me at Sherry, that's SHERI, at karmicevolution.com and book your reading today. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. Okay, so let's get into this week's Astro news you can use without further delay. Now, I'm going to dive right into the repercussions of the second Saturn in Aquarius square to Uranus and Taurus, which for this week on June 14th. So let's look again, just as a reminder, briefly at these archetypal energies. Now, Saturn is the foundational glue upon which society. He's not the same as Jupiter's system, but he presides over it by making the final decisions, aka judgments. So without a strong Saturn, we have no foundation upon which to build or make manifest our dreams, our society, our relationships, family, career, etc. Now in Aquarius energy represents our desire to individuate, to change, and to do so by thinking up outside the box solutions that some might deem rebellious, because it breaks up the older way of things. So Aquarius energy, it wants change, but inherently it's not necessarily always rebellious, because the other side of Aquarius energy, and I've talked about this before, is that it can also represent groupthink or our actual inability to break away from a particular ideology of a group, usually formed because we identified with that particular group within the greater realm of society. And by that, I mean, beliefs of the family, religion, politics, all this stuff that, is important to us, what we do for a living, all of that. So Saturn rules the zodiacal sign Aquarius in traditional astrology, and that was before the planet Uranus was discovered in 1781, which happened in tandem with the Age of Reason, which gave birth to the philosophies of people like the founders of the United States, the reason or for the American Revolution. So Saturn in Aquarius represents maintaining a foundation, because that's Saturn's basic purpose, but using new ideas that can either shift or change a little the makeup of that foundation. In other words, in the case of the U.S., the founding fathers now note the resonance in the word father to Saturn, because he's the archetypal authority or father figure, mythologically, archetypally, knew that this nation needed a solid structure of governance, but that it was one that had to supersede the old, where they all came from, the monarchies deciding everything for the people who had very little power, and utilize more modern ideas and concepts. And so the founding of the U.S. was based on a new ideology. And Uranus rules Aquarius in modern astrology, as many of you know. And again, at his best, Uranus is the archetypal energy, being a part of a group that comes up with new ideas about how to better the plights of mankind for the future. However, Uranus can also represent getting stuck in a certain ideology, and because Aquarius is a fixed sign, never deviating from it, which makes this energy potentially capable of never changing at all and wanting to stick with its old ideas even in the face of changing times. Now, Uranus, which is in Venus-ruled Taurus, asks us to make changes to our old ideologies by reconsidering and reevaluating what we deem to be most important in life. And Venus, archetypally, is about pleasure, beauty, and how we value ourselves and translate that value into the world around us and those in it. So the longer Taurus, another fixed sign, resists the Uranian call for change in this sphere, the more likely it is some kind of change will occur so rapidly that we won't have the time or the luxury to implement slower change. Now, the illustration of that is simply the past year and almost a half now that we've all, the whole world has labored under the Saturnian restrictions imposed by the coronavirus, right? And how things like lockdowns have changed the way that we have to relate to others. Venus is about relationships. We don't have relationships with those whom we don't value. Of Saturn-Uranus squares, and the one that just occurred, the first one was February 17th, the one that just occurred is June 14th, and the next one isn't due until December 24th of this year, are meant to point out to us on both a collective and personal level where we can make changes within the existing structure of our lives, and where, in order to do so, we need to, where we need to do so in order to move forward with our lives. So I wanted to take a quick look at the news, since most of you know I use what happens in the macrocosm as an as above, so below way of identifying how we can boil this down to our personal microcosms. Is a number of things that have happened just since Uranus squared, since Saturn squared Uranus on the 14th. The first thing that comes to mind is that New York and California, two of the nation's largest state governments, Saturn, both removed all restrictions, which is part of a foundational change related to COVID-19, and how these state citizens, this group, particular group within a larger group, right? The citizens of a state are a smaller group, a part of the citizenry of the entire country, which is part of the citizenry of the entire world, right? That's Aquarius. Now join others in their freedom, Aquarius, Uranus, from rules and regulations, Saturn, meant to keep society safe. So that represents a change, a current change, and fairly rapid, in our values. Second, the new Uranus Aquarius U.S. Attorney General, right, who heads the Department of Justice, a Saturnian organization or Saturnian portion of our administration, changed the Trump-era immigration rules that limited asylum consideration for those seeking shelter from domestic abuse or gang-related violence. Again, we have a change in values that came from the administration, and it's fairly rapid. Looking more globally or internationally, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who I would say represents Saturn, right? He's been the Prime Minister of Israel for 12 years, if I'm not mistaken, was ousted as Prime Minister and replaced by right-wing Naftali Bennett and a new coalition government, which now is a group, right? A coalition government as opposed to just one person in charge, that includes for the very first time an Arab party. Again, a change in values. We accept your group into our larger group. And on the same note, and while Mercury is currently still retrograde, the Israeli government gave permission the other day for an ultra-Orthodox Jewish parade to take place that incited violence by Hamas and ended with Israel again shelling Gaza. So in these two pieces of news related to Israel, we have the further knowledge that the different values inherent in foundational religious ideologies are again in conflict, right? And potentially causing a war. Again, on a separate note, coming back to the U.S., Lena Khan, a prominent First Amendment, again, Uranian Aquarius freedom of speech lawyer, Saturn and Jupiter, adamantly in favor of tighter internet regulations, is appointed chairwoman of the Federal Trade Commission. This is a change. I would point out that it's a woman, it's sort of in line with the fact that we now have our first woman vice president. So it's not that we haven't had women in charge of commissions or governmental agencies and things like that, or cabinet positions, but it's still, a bit of a change. And it's a move that's highly likely to result in new regulations based on changing values that bring to heel some of the current Wild West internet landscape, at least in terms of its operations within the U.S., right? Because we can only regulate the internet, Facebook, Twitter, Google, and all these companies within our sphere of influence. I'll move now to the Supreme Court, which is about as Saturnian as you can get, announcing two important decisions this week, actually today, yesterday or today, forgive me, that they will maintain, or their ruling maintains the foundational structure of the ACA, or Affordable Care Act, right? The structure, which is Saturnian, which serves the sick, disabled, and poorer members of society who can't afford health care or are unemployed. Again, Uranus Aquarius, a group, a subset of a group, by providing governmental, Saturn, health care by leaving it intact, because the legality of the ACA has been adjudicated numerous times since its inception in 2010. We could say this Supreme Court decision upholds the foundational premise, Saturn, to promote the health and welfare of the masses, Aquarius, and that over the past decade plus, values and ideologies on this topic have drastically changed. Again, Uranus and Taurus. Now the quote-unquote establishment has lost and the people have won. Juneteenth became a national holiday. Again, it was announced either yesterday or today. I believe I read that the holiday is going to be incorporated this Friday. And this is a foundational commemoration, right? It's Saturnian. Every year we have holidays. They form a foundation of our beliefs in this country, that these people that we commemorate, or events like on Labor Day and Memorial Day, which is a foundation, a Saturnian foundation, that in this case in Juneteenth is a commemoration for and about a previously disenfranchised segment of society. Again, we have Uranus Aquarius. Are we part of the group or separate from the group? And it becomes memorialized now and into the future, again, Uranus, through a change in our value system. Again, Uranus and Taurus. The Supreme Court today also announced its unanimous ruling that a Catholic social services agency can discriminate against same-sex couples who want to adopt, even though this violates local anti-discrimination laws in Philadelphia, which is where the case was filed from, or about where the case originated. So need I say more? I mean, again, we see the Uranian Aquarian resonance to ideology in the form of religious beliefs. And finally, the U.S. House of Representatives voted to repeal, this just came out this morning before airtime, the 2002 authorization that gave President George W. Bush power to invade Iraq. And I forget now, you have to forgive me, it was in 2002 or 2003, I think it was 2002. I remember being at a birthday party. My son was only 6 in 2001, so he was 7 or maybe 8, for a friend, and they had the television on there, and it was the first time we bombed there. So this move is a restriction, Saturn, and a change, Uranus Aquarius, and how much value, Taurus, we place upon our head of state, again, Saturn, to take actions without consulting the legislature, which is a group, which is, deemed to be, in this instance, Uranian, right? So I want to go back for a second to the mention of religion, because as we turn our attention to the retrograde station of Jupiter, which occurs at 2 degrees and 11 minutes of Pisces on June 20th, which is the same day the sun moves into the sensitive, protective, nurturing, family-oriented sign of Cancer. So protecting our tribe, our people, becomes more important as we move into a phase where Jupiter asks us to review our important beliefs. And the Saturn-Uranus energy, especially since Saturn's retrograde now as well, asks us to figure out where we need to incorporate a new value system, or look at how values have changed within the collective now, so that we can apply these and move forward in a way that doesn't inhibit future progress. So again, we could boil this all down to a personal level. I want to read to you just quickly a passage from Erin Sullivan, Jungian astrologer, who wrote the book Retrograde Planets Traversing the Inner Landscape. And she says this about Jupiter's retrograde, which will last from the 20th until October 10th, I believe, which roughly coincides with Saturn's retrograde period, which is already in motion since May 23rd and he'll station direct again on October 5th. She says, and I quote, "When Jupiter stations, the continuing growth and expansion one hoped would continue is slowly withdrawn, and an element of restraint is injected into enthusiastic progress." Because the sun, the station suddenly arrests or withdraws the expansive mood and inverts the energy. The change in tone or pattern of growth is usually directly related to a hierarchy of some kind, in which personal decisions become impotent or insignificant. In the week or so following the exact station, particularly around the exact sun trine, which we have occurring only a few days after the station on June 23rd this week. Next week. It becomes apparent that more time is likely to be necessary to evolve any idea, project, relationship, or plan. It will mean that any sense of future growth within matters which pertain directly to the house Jupiter is transiting appears to stagnate until Jupiter stations direct. Now, I'm going to talk to Mitchell in a few minutes, so I'm not going to dwell on it now, that we're moving into a period where we're going to eventually have 5 planets retrograde in the sky, and that this has been quite a source of conversation among astrologers. So we'll delve into that more. But by next week, by showtime at next week, because we have a 2:40 p.m. Eastern time and 11:40 a.m. Pacific time full moon in Capricorn at 3 degrees 28 minutes. And there are going to be some energies in the sky between now and then that are going to increase in energies that may make us, particularly as we experience the Jupiter retrograde, feel frustrated. Okay, so feeling stuck, feeling at a loss, feeling like we're not sure how we want to proceed is an energy that will probably grow at least up until the full moon, which is, of course, when we're going to release some of these frustrations. But before I get more into that, I do want to bring on Mitchell because I think that a lot of the questions that I want to ask him relate to all of this that's going on for this week and into the next week. So I'm going to read his bio now. Mitchell Lewis, a professional astrologer in New York City for more than 3 decades, specializes in financial astrology and medical chart interpretation, as well as in relationships, elective astrology, and life direction. Mitchell works with natal charts, transits, solar arc directions, secondary progressions, and composite charts. Through the 1990s, he worked on the floor of the New York Mercantile Exchange and became well known as an astrological trader and market analyst. He's been quoted in Barron's, the New York Daily News, and many other publications. Since 2011, Mitchell has been a regular guest on the radio show Coast to Coast with George Noory, where he discusses the economy, politics, and the future of our society. He appeared on the show just last week to discuss the economy, the pandemic, and our current political situation. In Living by Starlight, his ongoing monthly newsletter, as well as in lectures and numerous appearances on national television and radio, Mitchell has accurately predicted a number of world events, including the rise of oil prices, the collapse of the housing market, and the '08 stock market crash, which he precisely foretold within days of its occurrence more than a year in advance. He also accurately predicted the current stock market volatility in his lectures and writings during this entire past year. Recently, Mitch lectured online for the National Council of Geocosmic Research, or the NCGR, on the current and future state of the U.S. and global economy, and he's currently recording a series of Zoom webinars that will be available live and on his website. The first discussed the astrology of the coming election last year, and the next will be about the economy, the history of the stock markets, oil, gold, and the coming economic challenges. The first webinar is available for sale on his website at mitchastro.com. Will be followed in a few weeks by this second one. So you can join in live or view them at your leisure after fact. And we're going to give Mitch the opportunity to give out this information again, but you can simply go to his website and sign up for his newsletter and keep abreast of his exact webinar dates. Mitch is also the author of the Starlight Detective Agency Mystery Series, which highlights protagonist astrologer detective David Lowell and features New York City as a backdrop. Mitch's books have developed a cult following among savvy mystery buffs, and the third novel in the series, Evil in the First House, was published recently by Poisoned Pen Press, and it's the fourth book in the series, Saturn in the Second House, will be available soon. So welcome, Mitch. How are you today?
I'm great, Sherry. How are you, darling?
I'm good. It's a lovely day here in the East, yeah?
Yeah, I love the summer. As far as I'm concerned, it's the only part of the season to bother with. But after all, I am a summer baby.
Right. You're a Cancer, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have a Cancer moon, so I can relate. I get it. I get it.
No, I enjoy all 4 of the seasons, but I think a long weekend in the winter is enough, and then back down south.
Absolutely. Are you going to be a snowbird someday, you think?
Well, I try to get down to to visit friends either in the Miami area or sometimes Southern California, but I don't know. A lot has to do with a lot of things, living situations, the politics of the individual state. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into these decisions, not just whether it's warm or not. But I do love Miami as a city. It's a Pisces city and a Pisces state. And of course, all about water.
Right, exactly. And rising sea tides. Yes.
Well, that too, of course.
Right. Well,
look, because I deal with financial work a great deal, I have a lot of business people who come to me, and a number of them have invested in property in Miami Beach, and I warn them, All I can say is walk on Lincoln Road during a full moon or a high tide, and there's 2 feet of water. And you have to understand this isn't going away.
Right, right.
They recently decided the city of Miami is thinking about putting a 20-foot flood wall up around the entire bottom of the Miami coastline, which of course will make it impossible for anybody to enjoy the view of the ocean. And that's one of the reasons why they moved down there.
Oh, that's a wall. That's pretty Saturnian, huh?
Well, look, Sherry, a lot of people are talking about things like infrastructure. And these days, every single item has become a hot button of politics. All of a sudden, if you don't believe in Bitcoin, you have to belong to one or the other political party. If you don't believe in global warming, if you don't believe in this, if you do believe in that, and vaccinations back and forth. And this, you were talking about, of course, the Saturn Uranus square.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an important thing, but we're dealing with ongoing issues that supersede and transgress more than any transit, even America's Pluto return. People say to me, well, the Pluto return is just about ending. I say to them, when do you think it started? Oh, about 2 years ago. I'd say the Pluto return started about 40 years ago. I don't look at things. Well, first of all, I have a lot of Sagittarius in my chart. So I tend to look at bigger pictures, which is why I'm good at analyzing financial markets and world events and things like that. The outer planets take a long, long time to do their job, whether it's in your life or in the collective's life. And to say that well, people who say, well, the age of Aquarius, yeah, okay. An age lasts 2,000 years. It takes several hundred years to transfer from one age into another. It doesn't happen over a long weekend in the Hamptons. And, and so when,
yes.
well, there's astrologers who go online and say the age of Aquarius is starting because Uranus is here and up. Please, it's not a revolutionary change. It's an evolutionary change, which of course has become also a very popular topic in astrology. I think all astrology is evolutionary. I don't think there's such a thing as evolutionary astrology versus other kinds of astrology. I think all astrology is evolutionary, but what we're going through right now is so clear on some levels. You talked earlier in the Saturn Uranus. This is very important. They are in many ways diametrically opposed. Saturn wants stability, foundation, attachment to the past. Uranus wants just the opposite. It wants change, radical, revolutionary, and new ideas. And of course, in mythology, Uranus was the father and Saturn was the son, and Saturn blew his father up and all the rest of the mythology of it. And in politics, Saturn and Capricorn and the 10th house rule kings and queens and emperors and dictators. And Uranus and the 11th house and Aquarius rules government of and by the people, what we call democracy. And of course, Uranus was discovered just in time for the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and for a lot of changes, of course. It rules electricity, and so Ben Franklin tried to kill himself by putting a key on the end of a kite, and then he through those experiments, he invented the lightning rod. Nobody thought of that before. Put a metal thing on the top of your house, run it into the ground, and your house doesn't burn down. Very smart. He was a very smart guy. Had a few personal problems, but that's besides the point. And that's what we're in the middle of right now. People want change while they still want to hold on to the past. Now, you can do that if you are open to redefining what all of that means. But it seems to me that we are becoming, well, as you know, the chasm between the two parties in America is growing wider and wider. And I don't like to get into the direct politics of it, because it turns off half of the audience, no matter which side you take. And that's not what my goal is. But I want people to understand that while Saturn represents the past and the foundation and the structure, it also represents an unchanging energy. And while Uranus represents the future and experimentation and growth, it does not hold to the structure. If you have change without any foundation, you have chaos. If you have foundation without any change, then you are you're a stagnant society. And so we need to learn the balance between the two. And when we go through these squares, like we're going through this year, they are becoming more and more clear. Very obvious that you can't hold on to one or the other completely. You can't completely let go of the past, so you have nothing to stand on. And you can't completely let go of change, or you stifle the development of our society and our species. And that's the balance that a square represents. How do we do both? When you have a square in your own chart, what you need to really work through is, well, I need to change because whatever the planet is squaring one of the planets in my chart, but I can't change completely or I lose the structure and foundation of what that part of my personality represents. You know, in the webinar, I was hoping to do the webinar on the 26th of June, and I even announced it on Coast to Coast, but I'm having such difficulties with Zoom and PayPal and setting all this stuff up that I had to postpone it. We're going to do it in July.
Okay.
And it's going to be a very comprehensive examination of all the financial issues, including the stock market and oil and Bitcoin and gold and silver and real estate and literally everything. And throughout history, we've had bubbles and busts. And for example, right now we have a bubble in AMC. I started buying AMC at $2 a share. I just loved it. I thought that the pandemic was going to end, and it seemed very underpriced. And so I bought a bunch of it. And what do you know? Reddit came in with all of the what they call apes, and they gobbled it up and they ran it up to $20 a share. Well, I grabbed it. I sold it. I was very happy with my profit. They pushed it back down to about $8, $9. I started buying it back. Today, it's trading at $63 a share.
Wow. Okay.
And that's a bubble. It has nothing to do with the fact that people are going back to the movies. It is there's a tug of war between the hedge funds and the individual traders. I'm not going to waste time in our short segment, explaining all of that. There are plenty of YouTubes out there if you're interested. You can look up on them. But in the stock market, we have a lot of crashes throughout history, and most of the time, not always, but most of the time, those crashes are a hard aspect between Saturn and an outer planet, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. And the most prominent one is Uranus. The crash of '08 had Saturn in opposition to Uranus exactly on the New York Stock Exchange's Mars, which is why I was able to predict in my lectures and on radio and any place anybody would listen that we were going to have a major, major crash. And it was a result, of course, of the mortgage debacle that was going on, where they would sell. If you made $30,000 a year, they'd give you a mortgage on a house for $750,000.
Right.
And then they would take those mortgages and package them as what they were calling securities, and sell those securities to Iceland and Ireland and pension funds and Italy and Spain. And when the what hit the fan, half of those countries almost went bankrupt.
Right.
So, this is what the Saturn Uranus is capable of doing. But the only reason why that happened is because there were no regulations. The banks were doing whatever they wanted to do. And so they got away with murder, so to speak. And so it was a crash. Now, right now, we have the squares. Today, for example, I don't know where it is right now, but a little while ago, the Dow was down 330 points. Right now, it's down 223 points, but the NASDAQ's up 194.
Wow.
So, it's never as clear cut as we'd like it to be. Well, I wish it was. If that was the case, you could study astrology for 6 months, become rich, and be, a genius. It doesn't work that way. A lot of people study it for 60 years and still don't know what the hell they're doing with it, but I don't want to get into that. So, this is a lot of what we're in the middle of right now. The tug of war, the left, the right, whatever you want to call it. Biden has some things he wants to do. So far, he's doing pretty good. His approval ratings are very, very high. Um, but the tug of war isn't going to end. We are still fighting the same battle that we fought in the 1700s: states' rights versus federal rights.
Thank you. I've been saying that for a long time now. Thank you.
Also, the right of the individual versus the right of the collective. I have a right to go out and buy a gun, and in Texas now, I don't even need a permit for it, and I can walk in with my 6 shooters and go into a saloon and start a fight and kill a few people and call it self-defense. And so, where does the individual's rights begin and end? And then again, without getting too much into the politics, because I know it's going to annoy some of your listeners, but then there's the politics about, well, for example, when I'm on shows, people talk to me about COVID. I tell them, well, I had it last April. Oh my God, that's terrible. Well, I survived it. I didn't have to go to the hospital. It was a nasty bug, but it didn't kill me. And I did decide to get the vaccine. Now, I don't tell other people to get the vaccine or not, because I don't think it's my job to tell somebody else what to do with their body. And I don't think it's anybody else's job to tell anybody what to do with their body. I'm tiptoeing around, of course, a topic that is talk about a hot button issue.
Right.
So that's what we're dealing with: the collective versus the individual, the past versus the future. People who still deny that climate change is happening, when Lake Mead is where all the water for Las Vegas comes from. Lake Mead is at the lowest levels I think it has ever been since they built it, as a result of the Hoover Dam. And if they run out of water, then Las Vegas folds up, and that's the end of that. Trillions of dollars will be lost.
Right.
A number of years ago, Atlanta, that gets all of its water from one lake, the lake had a drought for 2 years. And they announced to the city that if we have a drought for another year, we're going to have to evacuate Atlanta. And luckily, they had rain and they filled up the lake sufficiently, so they were able to continue. And still, they deny that this is going on.
Right. Well, the question then becomes, I think, what does this energy what do the skies now tell us about how it will play out? I mean, I think I look at the Sibley chart and the Pluto return and say, well, if, at the inception of the country, Pluto, that there was a revolution, right?
Yeah, but the revolution wasn't Pluto. The revolution was because Uranus is close to the 7th house cusp. And look, you can't as you know, you can't oversimplify an astrology chart. And then, of course, there are some astrologers who make it so complicated that I don't even know what the hell they're talking about after a while.
Right.
In the Sibley chart, Sherry, not only are we going through the Pluto return, and Pluto right now is actually in opposition to America's Mercury. It's retrograding back for one more pass. The Pluto return, like I said, didn't happen over the last year or two. It's been happening, I mean, essentially, if you want, since shortly after the Second World War. We've been building up to this, and certainly since Pluto entered Capricorn, however many years ago that was. I'm not going to bother looking it up. We also have Neptune in opposition to our Neptune.
Right.
And in square to our Mars. So, Neptune rules infectious diseases. Why did America become the epicenter of the coronavirus at the beginning? Well, Neptune's opposing Neptune. But because it's a worldwide virus, the same thing is happening now that happened in 1918 through 1920. They don't know how many people died in that epidemic, in part because India did not keep good records. And what they were doing in those days in India was they were burning bodies in the street, the same way that they're doing it now. India is very overpopulated. It does not have a particularly balanced social order. It still has a pecking order of the different castes and so on. And so while the wealthy and the middle class may get their vaccines or survive, the poor people aren't going to get anything. And a virus doesn't care whether you're rich or not. It eats whatever it can get. And so as long as you don't give the potential, the vaccine to everybody, it's going to keep coming back in wave after wave. And that's what happened. 1918, 1919, 1920. We had a depression in America and in Europe from 1920 till late 1921. It was about an 18-month depression. Nobody talks about it. Nobody writes about it. I mean, obviously scholars do, but most people don't know about it. And there were a number of reasons why that depression occurred. And it was after that the so-called Roaring Twenties began. And the markets ran up for 7 years. It was truly an amazing bull market. But unfortunately, it topped out because of, among other things, the Dust Bowl. And we're in the same place right now. We have a chance to really rebuild our economy in new ways and to explore all kinds of new ways of creating money. And I don't mean Bitcoin versus cash. I mean building a society where there's equity for everybody. But the Southwest is running out of water. There's going to be water wars.
Yeah.
Already they're fighting about, the Snake and the Colorado River feed most of the Southwest and California and the San Fernando Valley, where they grow over 400 different crops and feed not only America, but half of the world.
Right.
And if that disappears, we're going to be right back in another depression.
Oh, wow. So do you think that we're going to go the right way? What do you think that this will bring us? I mean, we've got, I know you're talking about big picture, but I'm just trying to look at, I don't know, it's so confusing sometimes, right? It's like, does history, you've noted the line that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? So, I think a large part of those who follow, I don't know how to say this exactly, but everybody, a lot of people are always primed for Armageddon and the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Where
there are people who want that.
Well, there are people who want that, but there are also people who simply fear it. And so it's in the psyche, right, of some humans or a portion of the human population that we're all doomed to be extinct at some point. Now, the question is that, but life has gone on, so it's easy to feel, especially if you're of a certain age and stage in life, that, that things are so much worse than they ever were before. And we know historically that every generation tends to feel this.
But Sherry, after every catastrophe, there is a baby boom. Mm-hmm. Not just after the Second World War. After the Black Plague's first and most powerful wave through Europe, where over a third of the Europeans died. Mm-hmm. And what it did was actually change society. The Black Plague brought on the Renaissance. Without it, because the people were living in horrible circumstances, overcrowded villages, there wasn't enough food or agriculture to go around. People were dying of poverty and of childhood diseases. And then the Black Plague came through and weeded out the garden. And what do you know? All of a sudden, there was a lot more land. The middle class started to be created. It was a long time before it was the center of our society, the way we know it. But the whole society changed, and there was a baby boom. Mm-hmm. And after the First World War, there was a baby boom. And after the Second World War, because no matter, first of all, as I always say, I don't believe in being a doomsday prophet. If I'm wrong, I look like an idiot. And if I'm right, there's nobody there to pay me. So what's the point? Everybody's dead. Oh, okay. Now I can get a 2-bedroom apartment. So, and I also, look, I'm sorry, but there are people out there who are angry. Maybe they're angry at their mommies. Maybe they don't like how their lives went. Maybe they wish they were taller. Maybe whatever their problems are. And they hold this anger in. And they get angrier and angrier, and they go into a store and somebody doesn't treat them right, and they take this anger, if they do not have an outlet for it, and they project it out into the public. And that's not everybody by any means, but that's, I believe, a good number of the people who are doomsday crying, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. They want it. People who are afraid that the world is coming to an end, well, we all have that fear sometimes. There are nights when I wake up and I can't go back to sleep and I don't even know what's bothering me until I meditate and then I think about it and I go, oh my God, I'm worried about whatever.
Mhm.
But that doesn't have to motivate me.
Right.
I decide whether that's going to motivate me or not. It's a beautiful day out. I can take a walk in Carl Schutz Park right by my house, a lovely little park, and look at all the kiddies playing and the people who are happy to be out in the sun with their masks off and whatever. Or I can sit in my apartment and go, oh, the world's coming to an end. Woe is me.
Right.
Free will.
Right. Right.
So I don't believe that the world is ending, but I do believe that we are at a very, very difficult turning point where if we cannot change things and embrace first and foremost the truth.
Mhm.
The truth is, one of the losses that we're experiencing right now. Nobody knows what's real and what isn't.
Well, that's been amazing too. That's been amazing. But of course, I relate a lot of that to the fact that I guess you could look and say that deregulation, at least in this country, has led to the proliferation of propaganda. And I'm talking about the media. I'm not talking about any particular kind of media. So I'm not saying media in and of itself is supposed to be the reporting of facts in a fair way that represents two sides of an issue.
Right. Walter Cronkite.
Right. And yeah, it's so funny. I've been watching Mad Men. I've become addicted to Mad Men and seeing some of the actual footage, a lot of times they recreate the footage, but I'm like, oh, look, that's Walter Cronkite. Oh, look, that's, whoever,
Mhm.
or whatever. And it seems like we're in this phase. And of course, we've got the South Node in Sag and North Node in Gemini, and these eclipses this past 6 months, right? Because you mentioned Uranus on the descendant of the Sibley chart, and we know that the eclipse in November of 2020 hit that degree or very close to it. So we've got this kind of out of control. Anyone can say anything they want and turn facts into what's portrayed as true, or turn opinion into what's portrayed as fact, and then is then absorbed by other people as truth.
Right. But by the same token, Sherry, you can walk into a store minding your own business. Somebody behind the counter is in a bad mood, whatever their problem is, and they start a fight with you. And you say, well, I don't want to be treated like this. You've been horrible to me. So you go home and you write a letter or you call up the company and you complain about it. And so the company says, oh, we can't take that. So they go to the people at the store and say, what happened? And the people at the store make up something. Say, oh, that person came in and he was abusive. And you have no recourse unless you recorded what happened.
Yeah, or you have reliable witnesses. Yeah.
Right. And we are at a point now where there is no such thing as a reliable witness, even out in public, because of what they've been calling alternative facts.
Well, you get into issues now that when you mention that, like body cams for police and security, there's Uranus and Taurus in that too, right? I
Right.
mean, we've got, surveillance on one hand, which could be negative, but you have surveillance and recording, which of course can play out as positive. And then you have the refusal of certain authorities to release the actual videos. So we've got a whole host of issues. But you and I both know that in 2017 or late 16, when the election was over and Trump was declared the winner, that sales of George Orwell's 1984 skyrocketed.
You know
So
that last year, legally, forget about what's on the street, 1 million guns were sold for the first time ever. 1 million guns in 1 year, legally, through shops and shows and whatnot.
Right, right. Well, to go back again to Sibley just for a second and looking at the Pluto return, it's sort of like, and to the listeners, so we're sort of digressing from some of the things that I advertise we talk about, but I think it's very important, regardless. So, Mitchell's a big picture guy, like he said, but it's like the foundations upon which this country was structured or formed include the Bill of Rights, include the Constitution, and the right to bear arms. It's the interpretation of that that's changed and morphed and has caused disagreements, right?
Yes, but James Madison in the Federalist Papers actually wrote that the Second Amendment is to arm the citizens against the government.
Yeah,
So before you get into that argument with people who actually do their homework, you have to really read these things and understand. And there was tremendous disagreements in the founding fathers. Don't think that they agreed on everything. They didn't agree on anything. They just had to come to a conclusion where they could work together and defeat the British. But as far as everything else goes, we are fighting the same fights that we have fought for the last 240 years.
yeah, no, I agree. But again, it's sort of like, is it, we have an ideological, and in a sense, we might say we always do, but have Supreme Court, which is an ideological body, right? So some of them are the ones, I mean, we have judges now who use misinformation and disinformation as part of their reasoning
Yep.
to make rulings.
Yep.
And that's insane.
Right. So if, my definition of insanity is being too sane in a nut house. So if you're trying to look at this all logically and saying, well, don't you understand global warming, and you're dealing with somebody who, no matter what evidence you put in front of them, is never, ever going to believe in global warming or in the vaccines or in the rest of it, then what's the point?
Right.
And that's, look, Sherry, for what it's worth, again, I don't care which side of the political spectrum you stand on, but let's face facts. To misquote one of my favorite comedians whose name I can never remember, George Carlin, the Democrats play baseball and the Republicans play football. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Baseball, you run home, you tag them out, you slide. Football, you rip his effing head off.
Right.
And that is not changed. And occasionally, with certain Democratic presidents who were incredibly powerful people, they were able to push their agendas forward. For the most part, that is not the case, because the Democrats feel that they have a higher moral ground, or whatever you want to call it. Again, I don't want to take a side in this. That's not my goal. It's just understanding the reality of things.
Right.
And as long as that continues, there's going to be a lopsided government in this country.
Well, I've heard and read, and we only have about 3 minutes left, so forgive me for not giving you a heads up. I want you to give everybody your website and how to sign up for your newsletter and
Sure.
information again. But I've read too that places like China, which of course are always, it's known that China plans for the next century. They don't think short term.
That's
but
right.
Other countries look at the U.S. and they say, oh, the balance of power always shifts. So we know that if it's one thing now, maybe we don't have to worry about it because in 4 years it might change, or in 8 years it's going to change.
Absolutely.
But let me ask you just to tell everybody again how they can get in touch with you, sign up for your mailing list, and receive regular notices of what you're up to.
Well, the website is mitchastro.com. Or jupiterrising.com, but Mitch Astro is easier to remember. And on the front page, the home page, there's this thing that says sign up for the blog. You put your email in there, you'll get the free newsletters every month, announcements if I'm doing webinars, etc. If I'm opening up a shoe store, I'll tell you. And And that's the easiest, truthfully, the easiest way. If anybody wants a reading, they just go there. They can fill out the form. It'll come to me. I'll then send you an email saying, please email me here directly. And my email is mitchastro@AOL. So I keep that. I've been using that name for a long time, and you know, it's convenient, easy to remember. I don't have to keep changing the towels. You know.
Too funny. I love you. Anyway, listen, I hate to cut you short again, but you'll be back on. You know that you will. And I'm going to thank you for joining me today, having this interesting and lively conversation. Thanks to everyone else for joining us. I hope you've all found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on June 24th for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking, when professional astrologer and author Alex Trenoweth returns to talk about her brand new book, Mirror, Mirror, Famous People and the Actors Who Portrayed Them. And until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier,